I want to start by saying that I know what I'm doing is morally wrong by any measure. Still, I can't help myself. My name is Abigail, and I'm 26 years old, married to David, who is 29. We've been married for 3 years, together for 4. Everything happened quite quickly, and we were overjoyed when we decided to get married. I truly believed in true love, that it would always feel so wonderful and exciting. But somewhere along the way, I've realized that I carry an enormous urge to cheat. And not just a fleeting thought now and then, but a recurring, constant, creeping desire to do all sorts of crazy things with different people and in situations where the risk of getting caught is high. I get some kind of thrill from knowing I'm risking ruining everything. Sometimes I think I might be a psychopath or at least have traits of it, though it sounds completely insane to label myself like that. I don't know, I enjoy the excitement, and I enjoy feeling like I have power over the situation, power over the men. That's probably what truly worries me now as I notice that I'm becoming increasingly reckless. Maybe I'm even seeking a confrontation. I've already cheated countless times. This probably sounds terrible, but it's almost like a sport. It's hard to describe the feeling I get from doing it in a way that could really crush David if he found out. I've had sex in my wedding dress, on my birthday, on our wedding anniversary, on his birthday, and also during big family gatherings, like Christmas and Easter. I mean, it's so bizarrely thrilling to get away with it when there are people everywhere celebrating something big. I try to stay ice cold, make sure no one notices anything, and so far, I've managed. Several times by the narrowest margin. I often think, will I get caught now? Did someone hear us? Was I gone too long, and my heart pounds in my chest. Still, I go back and do the same thing again. Maybe more often, maybe with higher stakes. I don't know when it started, or rather, I don't know which of all the times was the first time I truly understood how strong my need for excitement is. I've gone back in my memory and thought that it might have been when David and I had a big fight about 2 years ago. We argued about something silly, I can barely remember what it was, but I do remember seeking comfort and validation elsewhere. I flirted with one of David's friends at a party, giving him looks, leaning forward during conversations in a way I knew would ignite desire in him. Later, we managed to sneak away into a closet. It was quick and rather clumsy, but the adrenaline rush I felt in that moment was absolutely enormous. I thought I was going to explode from fear and lust at the same time. Afterwards, I was afraid I would feel bad about it, but all I felt was euphoria. I felt triumph and warmth in my body. And it was so easy, no one suspected anything, no one even looked in that direction, because no one believes I would do something so insane. After all, I'm David's wife. Things escalated after that incident. The first time turned into a second time, a third time, and suddenly, I was caught in a pattern. Looking back now, I think that maybe, deep down, I want to get caught. Why else would I keep exposing myself to the risk all the time? It's as if I subconsciously long for David to discover me, either in the act or with some undeniable proof. Maybe I want to shake up our relationship. Or maybe I'm just a simple adrenaline junkie. When I think about it, I get scared of what's really going on in my mind. I claim to others, and to myself, that I love David, and yet I treat him in one of the most disrespectful ways imaginable. I even question whether I understand what love means at all. I don't feel trapped in our relationship, not on the surface, at least, but maybe I do, subconsciously. It's also not like I've only been with total strangers. I've slept with several of his relatives, even some who are quite close to him. Yes, I know how insane that sounds, but there have been parties where I've had a bit to drink, so has he, most people have, and then you make eye contact, share a few secret smiles. A couple of his cousins I've had sex with in a closet, in a bathroom, once even in a wardrobe during a family gathering. I've also been with some of David's friends. I do have to be very careful about who I dare to approach, though. Some of his friends are fiercely loyal. I'm almost certain they would say no and then tell David right away. And that would ruin everything. I don't want David to hear it from others, at least not yet. Call it double standards, but I want to decide how and if he finds out. Not someone else. I've been thinking about therapy. I mean, as long as I feel this magnetic pull towards being unfaithful, it's hard to resist. It's like a little devil on my shoulder whispering, "Isn't it time again? Don't you want to feel the thrill?" But I'm afraid of what the therapist might say. I'm scared of being labeled as a manipulative, ruthless person. At the same time, I can't help but wonder if it would be good for me to really dive deep into where this need comes from. Maybe it's a shadow from my childhood. I had a pretty chaotic upbringing, but nothing that should explain this behavior. I don't want to lose David, yet I do things that could obviously destroy our marriage at any moment. And I don't even know if I want to stop. Or maybe that's exactly what I want but don't dare to admit. A couple of times, it's come close to being exposed. Like when I was with one of David's cousins on our wedding day. We had some sort of annual tradition with a dinner and celebration. The family was there helping out. I snuck away for a few minutes to go to the bathroom, but I had already arranged with the cousin that he would follow me in 5 minutes. He came in, we closed and locked the door, and in a rush, we did it. It was a crazy mix of guilt and ecstasy. Unfortunately, we were careless. I accidentally bumped into a stool that fell over, making a loud noise. When we were done and opened the door, I met David's gaze in the hallway, but I think he thought I had fallen or something. He asked what had happened, but I just smiled and said I had a cramp in my leg, knocked over a stool, and apologized for the noise. His cousin slipped out the next moment, and David didn't see him. It was down to the second. Everything in me was pounding. I was still half turned on, half panicked. Afterwards, I had to sit down and catch my breath for a few minutes. Yet I went back out to the others and pretended like nothing had happened. There was also a time when I was chased into a kitchen by one of David's friends I was sleeping with when David suddenly went looking for me. The friend had me pressed up against a kitchen counter in the middle of a party, but luckily, David stuck his head into another door before coming to the kitchen. I just managed to move, fix my clothes, and my accomplice pretended to be grabbing drinks. David didn't suspect a thing. My heart was pounding afterwards, yet I still smirked internally at how close it had been and how we still got away with it. Lately, I've noticed that I'm raising the stakes even more. I want to do it in even more risky ways. I don't know why. Maybe it's that I want to get caught, or that I feel absolutely no fear of the consequences. Or perhaps it's some twisted way for me to live out a kind of power fantasy. It's definitely not that I don't care about David, but when these urges arise, I go cold. I can feel a sneer at the thought that he might get hurt. It's like part of me is truly indifferent to his feelings. Then I can look him in the eye later that same evening and think, what am I doing? But I shut it off. I've become an expert at hiding everything. I guess I'm writing here because I'm so torn. I'd like to hear what people think, even though I suspect I'll get lots of hate and accusations. Maybe this is also a way for me to relieve some of the pressure. And maybe I'll get advice I haven't thought of myself. I'm seriously wondering if I need to be single, but I don't feel trapped in our marriage, not consciously, at least. I'm also wondering if I even want to continue like this. It's hard to admit, but part of me doesn't want to give up the thrill. I'm simply torn. Update 1. This post has now received quite a few comments, and most people seem to think I should tell David. I understand the logic behind it, he truly deserves to know, but I refuse. I explain to them that I don't want to crush him or ruin his life, and the only thing that would happen is that I'd open Pandora's box of pain and chaos. The second most common advice I've gotten is that I should divorce him and let him go free without hurting him further. That might sound reasonable to some, but when I think about it, I don't want that either. I feel strongly that I want to keep David. Whether it's because I love him or love the security, emotionally and financially, I don't know. Maybe it's a mix. But in any case, it's not an option for me to just say goodbye and leave. A few months ago, before I really started reflecting on my behavior, the thought of divorce was completely unthinkable. Nowadays, I'm more open to everything, but it's still not something I'm longing for. Therapy is the third most common advice. I'm actually more inclined to agree that it might help, but I don't know what I'd say to the therapist. Hi, I'm a promiscuous, cheating person who enjoys deceiving my husband and exposing him to potential humiliation. I don't know why I do it. Sure, I'd probably get help understanding my own feelings, but it's still a step I haven't really taken seriously until now. At the same time, I think, if I love David but also love being unfaithful, why do I have to stop? Isn't it my business? If I get caught, well, then it all falls apart, and maybe we'll break up. The result would be the same as a divorce now, except he would be hurt. But is that a sufficient reason to break up now and tell him everything? I don't know. My feelings are so tangled. Yesterday, something new happened, which I also wrote about in a comment earlier. I had a meeting with one of David's friends after David fell asleep. We decided it last minute. I sent a text saying, "The door is open, come in quietly." And he came. I let him in the hallway, and we had a quickie there. It was very exciting. I was convinced David would wake up and come out of the bedroom at any moment. But apparently, he slept pretty heavily. I could hardly breathe out of fear, but the thrill took over. Afterwards, when the friend left, I was so full of adrenaline that I was shaking all over. I realized that over the years, I've increased the risks. It's almost like I want to challenge fate. But I don't know why. Am I seeking excitement, looking for an excuse to be left? Am I afraid to leave David myself but unconsciously want him to be the one to end it because I don't have the spine to take the step myself? All these questions are swirling in my head. Update 2. I've now decided to book an appointment with a therapist. It feels strange but also a bit liberating. I haven't told David about it. I figure that if he asks, I can just say that I'm feeling unwell and want to talk to someone about stress or work-related anxiety. It's not entirely untrue, after all, since I'm often stressed about my double life. Even though I don't want to admit it to him, of course. If he starts questioning it, I can say something like, "I'm just stressed because I feel down sometimes and want to check it out before it gets worse." It's a pretty good excuse, I think. Nothing easy to trace as a lie, because I have had more work anxiety lately, and it's believable. I hope it holds. I've also received a storm of hate in the comments. I understand it, and I'm not surprised. But I want to clarify that I don't care much about the hatred towards me as a person. It might sound cynical, but I'm genuinely pretty indifferent. I mean, I already know how morally reprehensible I am. 100 strangers spelling it out doesn't really change anything for me. I reminded people that I suspect I have psychopathic traits. That makes me pretty insensitive to others' guilt-tripping. Now, I'll wait a week for my first therapy appointment. In the meantime, it's my birthday, and I've actually arranged to meet one of David's cousins. He's a 20-year-old guy who trains MMA and is in very good shape. I feel so small and weak in comparison, which is something that excites me tremendously. I know it's messed up, but I can hardly wait. The plan is to meet up at his place for a quickie when I say I'm going out to buy something or fix something for the celebration. I know I'm risking a lot, but I'm clearly willing to take those risks. Wish me luck, that's all I can say. Smiley face. Update 3 asterisk. I've now had my first therapy session. It was an hour-long conversation where the therapist asked a lot of questions. I explained fairly early on that I have problems with infidelity, but I didn't go into just how extreme it is. The therapist took it calmly, she was professional and non-judgmental. She emphasized that I had done the right thing by seeking help, saying it shows that I do value my relationship with David, even if my behavior doesn't reflect that. She was very clear that the best thing for my situation is to immediately stop being unfaithful and to work through the emotions that arise when I don't act on my habits. She said it's easier to identify the feelings that bubble up when I'm lacking something, rather than just smothering them with more sexual encounters. I felt some resistance, my whole body almost protested. I promised to try, but at the same time, I was thinking that I had just had sex with David's cousin and might have topped up the high for a while. I guess we'll see how long it takes before I can't stand it anymore. One of her first questions was, "Why do you think you're unfaithful?" And I immediately replied, "Excitement, curiosity, and because I feel a little unsatisfied with David." She then wanted to know what I meant by unsatisfied. I tried to explain that we have a good sex life, but it just can't compare to the rush I get from being unfaithful, especially in risky situations. She then asked, "Is it emotional or physical dissatisfaction you're experiencing?" And I said it's probably a mix. At the same time, I have a need to explore different scenarios, different people, different dynamics, something David will never be able to fulfill alone. How could he possibly be multiple people in one body? We also talked a lot about my relationship with David in general. "Are you happy with him outside of sex?" she asked. I answered that I thought so, but that I sometimes wonder if I love him for real or just the idea of him. I mentioned my upbringing and how I struggle to feel deep empathy. The therapist was eager to ask about what my childhood was like, my relationship with my parents, and how I experienced intimacy and boundaries growing up. I answered as best I could, but it all felt messy in my head. She asked me to reflect on how I experience guilt. I honestly said that I don't feel very strong guilt in the moment, maybe just a theoretical understanding that I'm doing something wrong. But it doesn't weigh on me in the way you might expect. She noted that this might be worth exploring, that I might even have some antisocial tendencies, but that doesn't mean I'm a psychopath. Strangely enough, I felt oddly relieved to hear her say I'm not necessarily a psychopath. We ended the session by agreeing to keep meeting and for me to try to avoid further missteps in the meantime. I kept a straight face and nodded. Later, she said something along the lines of, "If you do slip up, try to notice how you feel during and afterward. That's important information." I smiled back but was already thinking about a plan I'd made. I have a barbecue party planned at our neighbor's place. They're hosting a big gathering, and of course, David and I are invited. One of David's friends, the one I've slept with the most times, will also be there. We have this dark, physical chemistry between us. He gets turned on by the fact that we're doing it behind David's back, and he gets extremely aroused by talking trash about David while we're together. It sounds completely bizarre, but unfortunately, I've also gotten into it. I don't know why. Maybe it's the forbidden aspect that's so alluring. In any case, we've planned to try sneaking off at the party, preferably into the neighbor's bedroom while most people are outside in the garden. This goes completely against my therapist's advice, but I can't help myself. I want to feel that adrenaline rush that comes from knowing you could get caught at any moment. I guess I'll have to get back to you with how it turns out. Update 4. Everything has gone to hell. David caught us. It was the worst, or maybe the best, moment for him to do so, depending on how you look at it. The party was in full swing. Many people were outside in the backyard, grilling, laughing, and having a good time. I and his friends slipped into the house and found our way to their bedroom. I was completely convinced that I would hear if someone came. I've gotten used to being alert, but we must have been too caught up in each other. I'm almost ashamed to say it, but I was just about to climax, and so was he. I closed my eyes and disappeared into the world of ecstasy. At that exact moment, David was apparently standing in the doorway, watching us. Neither of us heard or saw him. He must have snuck in, or we were just utterly careless and consumed by the moment. By the time we heard him scream, it was too late. He had seen everything, especially since I was facing the door with my eyes closed, while his friend stood behind me. The sight must have been extremely shocking for David. He rushed in and knocked his friend down. I barely had time to react. The friend fell backward, David yelled something incomprehensible, and then he attacked again. I tried to get in between them, but I don't even know if I really wanted to stop him. It was like a movie. David punched him several times, hard, in the face. Other guests heard the commotion, came running, and it ended with an ambulance having to come and take his friend away. I don't know how badly injured he was, but he was definitely dazed and bleeding heavily. I had never seen David violent before. He's usually very calm, almost too calm, but this time, there was a complete fire in his eyes. It's crazy, but I felt a thrill of excitement in the middle of all the chaos. I wasn't scared, more fascinated. When everything had settled and the ambulances and police had been there, David packed up some of his things. Now he's staying with one of his closest friends, someone I would never dare to approach because I know he's fiercely loyal to David. I've barely heard from David since then, apart from a few angry texts saying he can't understand how I could do this. I've given him some space, haven't bombarded him with messages. I feel a strange emptiness, a kind of listlessness. I don't even know if I want to save our relationship. Probably not, because would I really change? I'd probably just do the same thing again with someone new, one of his other friends or relatives. I'm pretty sure David will file for divorce, and I don't know if I'm sad about it. Right now, I mostly feel a cold emptiness, and maybe a bit of curiosity about what happens next. Maybe it was inevitable that it would end this way. Maybe my desire to be discovered finally became reality, and now I get to see the consequences. It feels a bit like a movie, except it's real, and I have no idea what to do next. It's emotionally confusing. I know I shouldn't, but part of me wonders how his friend is doing. Should I contact him and check in? It feels so twisted, but I find myself thinking, I wonder if I could sleep with him again, and I'm ashamed for even having the thought. It's probably impossible to fix anything at this point. I probably won't hear from the friend for a long time, and David doesn't want to see me. I'm sitting here in an apartment that echoes with emptiness, with David's things half-packed and our marriage in ruins. And I don't know if I care. The emotional coldness is almost eerie, but I can't deny it. On one hand, I've probably had the worst day of my life. On the other hand, I can't stop a part of me from saying, well, now it's out. What happens next? I guess the next step is David sending me a message saying he wants a divorce. I might give him a quick agreement, not make it harder than it needs to be. My therapist is probably going to be shocked when I tell her how quickly everything spiraled out of control. She told me to avoid infidelity in situations where I could get caught, but I ignored her advice entirely. Maybe it was inevitable that I would drive this off a cliff. I'll probably continue therapy because I guess I'll need some sort of guidance. But right now, I'm mostly sitting with this strange emptiness and have no idea what I want or need. Maybe I really am psychopathic because I'm not feeling the kind of anxiety I expected. I'm not panicking about losing my husband and everything we built. I'm not furious or devastated. I'm just cold. And if I feel anything, it's still a lingering pulse of desire when I think about how David flipped out and beat his friend to a pulp. I don't even know how to interpret that. Now that I've written all this and read it through, I feel a kind of indifference. I guess there will be more comments saying I deserve everything bad coming my way. Maybe that's true, maybe not. But I want to thank everyone who has engaged with my updates despite everything. Maybe I'll update again soon about how the divorce is going, or if David, in some bizarre way, wants to reconcile. Right now, I don't think so. But you never know. Anyway, I keep breathing, and the days go on. And I don't know if I should be ashamed. That part of me feels almost relieved. Maybe this was the end of the biggest lie of my life. And something new begins. We'll see what happens. At least I'm certain I'm not going to write, "Wish me luck," right now, because I'm not even sure what I want. But I guess life goes on, with or without David. And with or without my insatiable desire to gamble everything.
If you liked this story, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. It helps a lot, and you won't miss out on any future stories. Take care and live your best life.